Hello, I'm John Coleman from ApocatastasisInstitute, an institute for the humanities and alternative college and high school here on New Milford, Connecticut, USA. Today I'm being joined by the Energizer Bunny, it seems, Dr. James Fetzer, and we're going to get caught up with the court proceedings and all sorts of other topics, no doubt, in our bi-weekly look at the news and events. And before I kick things over to Dr. Fetzer and get caught up with how he's doing, just one announcement concerning Apocatastasis's, and that is that our semester begins right after Labor Day on the 2nd of September. And this autumn semester, Dr. Fetzer will be doing a class on conspiracies and critical thinking. And I'll leave it to Dr. Fetzer to explain that class in the course of our discussion, maybe now or at the end of the recording. But to put it in a nutshell, check out that course and all of our collaborators' courses, whether that's Vandana Rataria with her mathematics, or Lorenzo Malawane and his Freedom Forge, Dr. Fetzer here, and some others as well, Angela Malik. So we have a lot of talent on deck. And with that announcement being seen to, Dr. Fetzer, welcome. Hope you're doing well, and take it away, sir.
Thank you very much, John. Yes, this will be a college-level course, 15 weeks plus a 1-week break where I may have a special featured edition. Wednesday evenings from the comfort of your own home by Zoom. There's a tuition of $150, which is about what you'd pay if you took a family for a dinner today. So I don't believe that's excessive. Consider it $10 per class, which will be 2 hours. And then I plan to leave the opening for another half hour for free-flowing discussion and debate among the participants. I'll say more about the class when I conclude my presentation today. But I begin with BitChute and Rumble, which were created as alternatives to YouTube as a video platform that would not be invested in censorship. So I claim to be promoting and champions of freedom of speech. But we all know freedom of speech has certain limits. Defamation, for example, you can say it, but you can be held liable for it. Harassment, cyber stalking, elder abuse. It turns out that BitChute and Rumble are both aiding and abetting an individual who's been attacking me over and over and over again. You'll be astonished by what I'm about to explain, where I've done my best to correct the record, but they have been unavailing, unresponsive, continuing to allow and to support these abuses, not only of me, but of my colleagues. Thus, I have now filed lawsuits against Rumble on the one hand and BitChute on the other, which I'm going to review here for you. And because the document is relatively short, it is posted on my blog at jameshfetzer.org. I'm going to go through it in detail. What you see now is the top of the United States District Court. This is federal court for the Western District of Wisconsin, where the suits have been filed. And this is the top of the cover page for the first of the complaints of the suits. Here I've now given a press release, Madison, Wisconsin, August 14, 2025. Rumble and BitChute were sued today for violating their own terms of service. Many have found themselves at targets of abuse in the past, but the case that prompted these lawsuits may be the most egregious in the history of the internet. A plaintiff alleges that he has been subjected to egregious forms of harassment, cyberstalking, defamation, and even elder abuse over 700 times by videos created by one Victor Hugo Vaca II, which they have published since January of 2025. The suits were filed by James Fetzer, PhD, on behalf of himself and his colleagues who have been attacked for speaking up on his behalf, and every Rumble or BitChute user who has flagged the video only to have the moderator reply that it conforms to BitChute or Rumble's terms of service, which declare that those platforms would not allow personal information promoting harm or injury to any group or individual, including libel, slander, doxing, defamation, or violation of privacy rights. Fetzer says it's all a sham and that they are legally liable for violating their own contract. We submitted dozens upon dozens of complaints to specific videos, which were loaded with defamation and violation of property rights, Fetzer explained, yet they came back promptly with claims to have reviewed and found to be consistent with our terms of service. Those reviews appear to have been done by AI bots, not human beings. So we sent them both cease and desist demands, identifying the terms of service that were being violated, not just once, but hundreds of times. No response, just crickets. They appear to believe they are immune from liability for their platform users' content. The suits were filed separately against BitChute and Rumble at the federal court in the Western District of Wisconsin, while Section 230 of the Communication Decency Act provides broad immunity from litigation stemming from user content. Social media platforms lose that immunity when they materially contribute to the creation or development of the unlawful content. Fetzer became the target of a relentless defamation campaign across both social media platforms after terminating Vaca, a contributor, from his shows on Revolution Radio, The Raw Deal, back in January. After he was terminated, Vaca launched a 7-month defamation campaign that is still ongoing, in which he sought to discredit, defame, and deplatform Fetzer over his reporting on Sandy Hook. Vaca posted hundreds of videos defaming Fetzer to the point of overwhelming search engines with his defamatory content, which Fetzer describes as political pornography. As part of an effort to isolate his target, Vaca defamed colleagues who supported, defended, or hosted Fetzer on their shows through a relentless campaign that includes obscene thumbnails and grossly false allegations of crimes, sexual misconduct, and more. The contributor, Victor Hugo Vaca Jr., who bills himself as a maverick artist, initially retaliated by attacking Fetzer, claiming Fetzer had thrown his Sandy Hook lawsuit, which was absurd since Fetzer had even carried it to the U.S. Supreme Court and has 4 appeals currently pending before the Wisconsin Court of Appeals District 4. When Kevin Barrett, who had been present at the trial for damages, told him Vaca was wrong, it made no difference. He proceeded in reckless disregard of facts. Vaca has also targeted Alex Jones and Wolfgang Halbig. The AJ reference may be a distraction. Victor has characterized Fetzer as, quote, a gnat in the way of what we are trying to do for Jones. He keeps Fetzer in the foreground and includes his name even when he's not part of the video content. A mild example of his work displays his preoccupation with penis art. Already in 2008, the New Times of Miami was reporting that Vaca was, quote, hanging 4-foot penis paintings across a VIP section of Art Basas as one of Miami's strangest. Today, Victor markets a line of men's underwear for men who love men, using Fetzer's name to promote the product, which features the image of a penis, implying that Fetzer must be gay. Fetzer is straight, with a son from his first marriage and a daughter by his second. Vaca's smears are unrelenting and very often cruel and sadistic. Vaca has now expanded his list of targets to include virtually everyone who has featured Fetzer or spoken out on his behalf, including Mike Adams, X22 Report, Stu Peters, SGT Report, Russ Winter, Joaquin Agopian, Brian Davidson, Susan Bradford, Dave Gahary, FTJ Network, John Coleman, Real Deal Media, Sophia Smallstorm, Giuseppe Vavangula, Carl Herman, and more. Indeed, he appears to be attacking half the alt-truth community. Vaca has been called the angel of death for his ability to smear and libel using claims to artistry and reporting as his cover. His attacks have run as many as 5 or 6 in a single day, suggesting that he is being paid by the piece. As part of an effort to isolate Fetzer, his target, Vaca defamed colleagues who supported, defended, or hosted him on their shows through a relentless smear campaign that included obscene thumbnails and false allegation of crimes, sexual misconduct, and more. Vaca has acknowledged being in communication with the BitChute CEO Ray Vaheri, thereby revealing in the process a network of operatives working within and through the platforms to weaponize free speech on behalf of political interests. Fetzer seeks $10 million from each platform for profound personal, professional, and reputational damage and emotional distress, and treble penalty damage for willful neglect and material support that enabled and furthered the damages and injury. Fetzer maintains that monetary damages are secondary and intended as punishment for inflicting other than financial damages, and that removing the videos and preventing the ongoing offenses is a primary concern. Many individuals have been targeted through Vaca's defamatory campaign, a few of whom are named in court documents, though the number of injured parties is now quite substantial. Both platforms subscribe to a free speech absolutist ethics, in which harmful or hateful speech is largely unregulated and appears to be encouraged and supported and weaponized for political purposes. Legal documents concerning the case against Rumble can be accessed and read here. Justia, link. Pacer, link. Download here. Rumble complaint. Rumble amended statement of claims. Legal documents concerning the case against BitChute, Deep State Protocol LLC, can be read here. Justia, link. Pacer, link. Download here. The complaint, the amended statement, and the request to amend the amended statement. Summary. Fetzer, a former Marine Corps officer and McKnight Professor Emeritus from the University of Minnesota, Duluth, flagged the content, served the platform with cease and desist notices, and filed affidavits with a court, signed examples of the abuse and specific violation of both the user agreements and the law. The platforms have refused to moderate the content or respond to the complaints, prompting Fetzer to file suit this month to force BitChute and Rumble to comply with their own user agreements with regard to unlawful and hateful speech. Link. BitChute and Rumble sue for violating own terms of service. Punitive penalties could run actually 30 million, not just 10. Contact. For more info or interview requests, contact Jim Fetzer directly by phone at 608-354-4280 or email at jfetzer@d.umn.edu. John, your thoughts?
Yes, well, thank you for that rundown, first of all. And yes, it's I think a sign of our times and maybe our lack of education that people believe that they can run their mouth and insult people and do innuendos and these foul sorts of thumbnail images that they adorn Victor Hugo's videos. That isn't free speech. Free speech is not, it's in for actual topics that you're not going to get burned for in party politics or in the academy. There's tenure and all this stuff. But the fact that it is, because I've heard not just on the general, the man in question, but even in the so-called truth community, people cannot make this discernment that attacking people and insulting people and the other points you make, elder abuse and whatnot, this is not free speech, and it certainly is not helping the cause of truth, to divert so much resources into insulting and so forth. In fact, right before we recorded, I get these updates from Rumble with the different videos, and Vaca had sent out another one with your name in it and some other nonsense in the tagline. Almost every video this individual puts out has Dr. Fetzer's name in it.
Yes. When I checked earlier today, John, there were, I think, 748 where he'd been attacking me, and he uses the thumbnail art with unflattering pictures and images. For example, in attacking Susan Bradford, he found the image of a naked elderly woman, and he put her face upon it and used that as his art in an attempt to humiliate her. He learned that I'd had a heart attack in the past, and he sought to build on that, even openly admitting he was seeking to induce a heart attack, where one of his images included a tombstone and the implication hoping I would die soon. It's that bad. So there's a mess. He's accused people of pedophilia, of family incest, a whole host of issues. It's really quite grotesque, and it's time BitChute and Rumble be called to account.
And meanwhile, something else I'd add to that, just as I was thinking late. Oh, if I could just add one more thing, Dr. Fetzer.
Please do.
With BitChute and Rumble, unrelated to this court filing, but I was thinking about this lately, so I'm going to make a parallel. I was last night watching the television news just to see what the devils are up to, and it struck me that I found Fox News to be more obnoxious than CNN, because CNN is obviously an intelligence operation, but Fox News. I was thinking, why does this bother me more? And I'm going to bring it back to Rumble and BitChute. Fox News leans into very wholesome things and pretends to be a type of opposition, and they're not in any way, shape, or form. And the same with the online videos. So you have YouTube, which is run by technocrats and nerds in California, and they're censorious and they have their own agendas. And then in the past few years, you've had this BitChute and Rumble, and there are others that have risen up. And I can tell you, using those platforms, again, this is completely unrelated to Dr. Fetzer's point, but about just about this so-called alternatives. I can tell you that those platforms, BitChute and Rumble, are way more controlled than YouTube, which is super controlled as well. I don't think they're really free speech platforms at all. And part of that is you never see the counts go up. Even just regular interaction on these sites, you ought to see just regular mundane stuff. The counts will just naturally go up in terms of subscribers. And it's more lockdown than even YouTube. So I just wanted to say that too. I find that this appeal to free speech that these platforms make, and the misuse of free speech. Yes, sir.
Yeah, they're propaganda platforms. They're just more subtle about it. And here, proving that BitChute and Rumble were complicit emerges from, for example, I just had a caller to my show yesterday. He pointed out if you do a search on Jim Fetzer, you get Victor Hugo on Jim Fetzer. You don't get Jim Fetzer, where they've altered the algorithm to put Victor Hugo's attacks on me priority over those searching for me. There is proof. That is a smoking gun, John. That BitChute and Rumble are all in on this. And if you read the complaint, there's a rather thorough explanation of the interconnection between the and other media figures that you will find familiar. That is going to come as a surprise, because there's a very deep network beneath the surface tying these organizations together in a malevolent effort to suppress freedom of speech, contradicting their claims to be free speech platforms.
Yes, and you're part of it too, especially on BitChute, is it's almost meant to discredit research community and alternative news and things, because the vitriol. I mean, I've never gotten anything constructive in the comments on BitChute. It's all the most outrageous Nazi stuff, vulgar things about other so-called races, and it's almost, and I think it's more than almost, meant to make anyone who's questioning the mainstream seem bonkers. You either have complete white bread, normie controlled YouTube, and then you have a bunch of eccentrics of a very violent nature on things like BitChute. And
yeah, what they're doing is committing the elementary fallacy known as a straw man. They're creating an exaggerated version of positions that's easy to attack rather than the real position, which may be more difficult. So by giving these, in fact, that's part of Victor's role. When he was on my shows, he would constantly reiterate, it's the Jew, it's the Jew, it's the Jew, endlessly. That was part of why it took him off the show. He was giving a simplistic characterization. I'm now convinced Victor himself is a Jew and a provocateur, and he's trying basically to destroy the alternative truth community from within. That appears to be his designated role. But where he was initially hired to attack me, because it appeared my Sandy Hook lawsuit, which I lost initially and then seeking to have reversed, might prevail with 4 different appeals before the Wisconsin Court of Appeals. I think they're worried. In fact, friends of mine in the Sandy Hook community have told me that Sandy Hook Promise, which is still raking in over $1 million a month on the Sandy Hook scam, hired Victor to attack me for that very purpose.
And I can tell you, as I mentioned on the show before, that the Newtown Police Department has a brand new police department there, and the whole town is swimming in money. So yeah, there's a lot of hanky panky with that. So we'll have to keep an eye on that point there, Dr. Fetzer.
Excellent, John. Then turning to the summit in Alaska, I have a story prior to the summit and then following the summit. Putin tells Trump he'll halt war in exchange for eastern Ukraine. This is an update from Zero Hedge. And by the way, I read these stories so you know it's not my words I'm reporting. I'm those of other sources on which I then comment. But I want you to see the source, the original source, which is something that they preclude, by the way, on Wikipedia. Wikipedia will not allow original sources, so I can pick and choose among secondary sources and the attitudes. I mean, some are going to be positive, some are going to be negative. They pick and choose the sources they'll allow to be cited. In other words, that's a manipulation. The first thing you learn when you undertake graduate work, turn a degree, is to depend upon original sources, not secondary. So that's a game they're playing of which the public is largely unaware. Here, Zero Hedge. Russian President Putin had detailed his demands for a ceasefire in Ukraine. The Wall Street Journal reports the sweeping proposal demands major territorial concession by Kiev and a push for global recognition of its claims in exchange for a halt to the fighting. Putin told Witkoff he would agree to a complete ceasefire if Ukraine agreed to withdraw forces from all of Ukraine's eastern Donetsk region, according to official briefed on the call. Russia would then control Donetsk, Luhansk, and the Crimean Peninsula, which it seized in 2014 and was recognized as sovereign Russian territory. Russia now occupies most of Donetsk and Luhansk, but Ukrainian forces still control sizable chunks of territory, including key cities that are now strongholds of its defense. So here's a map showing really all the regions which Russia would like to possess. And I notice here, Kherson and Zaporizhia. Here's Crimea. Here's Donetsk and Luhansk. In between are Zaporizhia and Kherson. When Trump has talked about land swap, he's thought, give Luhansk and Donetsk and Crimea to Russia, but keep Zaporizhia and Kherson for Ukraine. That won't work. Just look at the geography. So Russia couldn't possibly agree to that. but I do believe that's what Trump was talking about when he said there'd be some land swaps. As we detailed earlier, Bloomberg is reporting that Washington and Moscow are aiming to reach a deal to halt the war that would lock in Russia's occupation of territory seized during its military invasion. Really, it was intervention. Since the coup of 2014, which was engineered by America using $5 billion of American taxpayer dollars to dump the Russia-friendly president of Ukraine and replace him with Western puppets, of whom Zelensky is the successor, they have been conducting artillery barrages into Donetsk and killing over the years 2,000, roughly, Russian-friendly, Russian ethnic citizens of that area. They were about to undertake a massive assault that would have been analogous to the slaughter of the Palestinians in Gaza when Russia intervened with its special military operation. So even as worthy a news site as Zero Hedge seems to me not to get it right, the facts of the matter. U.S. and Russia officials working toward an agreement for the summit with Trump and Putin as early as next week. Of course, it was held Friday. The U.S. is working to get a buy-in from Ukraine and European allies. Putin is demanding Ukraine cede its entire eastern Donbass to Russia, as well as Crimea, which it forces, it says, illegally, but in fact it was legal. It was a referendum in accordance with international law, joined Russia in 2014. That would require Zelensky to withdraw from parts of Luhansk and Donetsk, handing Russia victory its army couldn't achieve. Well, Russia's achieving all the military victories. I mean, it's ridiculous. Ukraine has lost an estimated 1.5 million troops. Russia about 10%, 150,000. Such an outcome would represent a major win for Putin. Well, that's very misleading. He's won the war. What are the odds Zelensky goes for this deal? Will Europe back it? Zelensky risks being presented with a take it or leave it to accept the loss of Ukrainian territory, while Europe fears it would be left to monitor a ceasefire as Putin rebuilds his forces. Putin doesn't have to rebuild his forces. He's got his forces. He's got the production facilities. He's in great shape and he's winning or has even won the war. Russia would halt its offensive in Kherson and Zaporizhia along the current battlefields as part of the deal, cautioning that terms and plans were still in flux and could change. Oil prices immediately tumbled on the report. That's all to the good. In other words, if the war in Ukraine ends, the future with oil prices is going to be much, much better. Meanwhile, Zelensky says he'll have none of it. He won't cede the Donbass to Russia. Zelensky is speaking out against a reported peace deal with Moscow to be discussed by Trump and Putin at the upcoming summit. While Russia and America have not divulged the details, leaks suggest Putin would demand Ukraine cede the entire Donbass region. Moscow's forces control most of the far eastern Ukraine. The Kremlin already considers the oblasts of Donetsk and Luhansk to be sovereign Russian territory. I am not going to surrender my country because I have no right to do so, Zelensky said Tuesday. If we leave Donbass today, our fortification, our terrain, the heights we control, we will clearly open a bridgehead for the preparation of a Russian offensive. According to recent reporting about a proposed agreement, Kiev would also be asked to recognize Russian control of territory it holds in southern Ukraine. Previously, Putin called for him to cede Zaporizhia and Kherson, which link Crimea to the Donbass along southeastern Ukraine, as I've shown on the map. Additionally, Ukraine would agree not to join NATO and give up weapons that can be used to attack Russia. Trump has said some land swapping would be needed to end the war. As I'm saying, he is, I'm convinced, talking about Kherson and Zaporizhia, which would be absurd because it would disconnect Donetsk and Luhansk from Crimea, and Russia needs a continuity. The Trump Putin plan scheduled for Friday has caused concern among NATO members in Ukraine, with European states pressuring Trump to invite Zelensky to the meeting. The path to peace in Ukraine cannot be decided without Ukraine. Leaders from France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Britain, and Finland, and EU Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen said in a joint statement. But Zelensky is unrelenting. Not only that, when he talks about the key cities, they're all collapsing. The Russians continue to advance. So here's Hal Turner. There is an unexpected development. Ukraine defense have collapsed at the city of Pokrovsk. Ukraine military is now sending urgent message to the townspeople. They have less than 2 days to pick up and evacuate. The same is happening in Kupiansk, Seversk, and soon Konstantinokova. It appears Russia will take all 4 settlements more or less at the same time, basically merging 4 operational crisis sectors into a strategic disaster for Kiev. Russia has made a major breakthrough in the Ukrainian defense. Ukraine simply does not have enough people to hold the lines anymore. Russia found a weak spot and just drove ahead. In the Doparilla area, Russian troops have broke through a front to a depth more than 11 kilometers, find weak spots in their defense. They've entered the Kherson Yar and Zolta Kolesev, where they are accumulating forces to develop the success. At the same time, the Russian Federation is advancing toward Doparilla, Karamansk Highway, consolidating the areas. This is a catastrophe for Ukraine. John, your thoughts?
Yes, 2 points, Dr. Fetzer. One of which, can you scroll back to the initial map of Ukraine that you had, where it showed the whole country and the part that was held by Russia, or that is Russian at this point? And as Dr. Fetzer does that, I'll make 2 points, one of which has to do with the in-theater situation. North of the Crimean Peninsula in 20 and 23, there was this, what was dubbed the summer offensive. It should have been the spring offensive. It took so long for NATO and these United States to get equipment there. There we go. That's it there. Thank you. So yeah, right above the Crimean Peninsula, this is where you had this summer offensive in 20 and 23. This is 2 years ago, 2 years fresher. Yeah. Here's on. Thank you. Yes. And it took, that thing was over schedule by at least 6 months. And the Ukrainian army very valiantly in terms of their troops and very sacrificially fought all summer into the autumn, and they did not even make it to the actual lines of defense that the Russians had built. They spent the entire summer slogging it out with the initial trenches and pillboxes, and they did not actually get to the actual hardened defenses. And that was 2 years ago. And you can see all that territory has been retaken in Kherson. And there's a lot of movement along the front there. And that, as I've said before in our recordings, that's very typical of how the Russian army operates. It's this slow grind. But the Ukrainians are not only running out of men, that's long been the case. They're running out of mercenaries and Nazis and Islamicists that they've pulled in, the Poles that are dressed up and all. They're running out of that. So things are going to be moving quickly now. And the Russians are never going to give up Crimea. And now that they don't have to rely solely on the Kerch Strait Bridge and they have that territory in Kherson, they're not going to give up that either.
Yeah.
So,
John, you're 100% correct.
Zelensky go back to his cocaine. Yes, sir.
I do think with high probability, Putin may be forced to take all of Ukraine because otherwise, they're going to conduct ongoing guerrilla warfare from the portions they do not control. Meanwhile, Sonar 21 was reporting Ukraine was working frantically to disrupt the Putin and Trump summit. Let's start with an interesting post from Joe Suzara's Substack. I don't know if it's true because I haven't found other media sources reporting it, but there are problems with details. namely, White Hat Sunday killed a Ukrainian assassin in Wasalla, Alaska, 5 days before Trump was scheduled to meet with Putin. At approximately 10 p.m., soldiers from the 10th Special Forces stormed a bungalow on Front Street near Lake Lucille, shooting dead 42-year-old Stefan Ostrovich, a resident of Kiev, former employee of Ukraine Ministry of Defense. He was also a trained sniper, having spent a decade with Ukraine Special Ops. U.S. Special Forces had to kill him, the White House told Real Raw News, because he pulled a pistol on them. After neutralizing the threat, they found two SIG P229 pistols, a scoped and suppress-fitted Daniel defense rifle. That's a very good weapon. And the expertly forged passport he had used to enter the U.S. via Anchorage. This is an entertaining story, though the author has doubts about its veracity. I have the Daniel defense rifle chambered with a 5.56 millimeter NATO round, not a cheap firearm, nor is it commonly stocked in gun stores. How did he get his hands on that rifle? It is not a sniper rifle, but it with a first-class optic, again, not cheap. A trained shooter could knock a target with accuracy out at 300 yards, I'd say considerably further, actually. How did a Ukrainian citizen arrive in Alaska, pick up a Daniel defense, obtain an expensive optic and silencer? Even he brought the optic and silencer with him, there's the additional question how he get through customs. Once he was in place in Alaska, he still needed to find a gun range so he could zero the rifle using the scope. You don't just slap it on the rifle without firing shots to make sure bullet is hitting where you're aiming. I'm also skeptical such a mission, since it was not time critical, would be given to a 10th Special Forces soldier. Don't get me wrong. The guys are skilled, but they're not trained for this kind of mission. Secret Service has a SWAT team capable of carrying out the mission, or alternatively, FBI's HRT could have been dispatched. Let's just say I have my doubts about the story. A more realistic tactic might be Kiev is preparing a provocation to disrupt the negotiations scheduled for August 15th between Putin and Trump, worrying the Russian Ministry of Defense. According to available source data, Friday, the armed forces had planned a provocation using UAVs and missiles on one of the densely populated residential areas or a hospital in the Kharkiv region. The consequences are documented by Western journalists brought in. They've been delivered the day before on the pretext of preparing a series of reports about residents in the city. The Kiev regime plans to place all responsibility for the strike on the Russian armed forces to create a negative media background for disrupting negotiations. Provocation also possible in other settlements. Maybe this is just a piece of information warfare, that is propaganda. We'll have to wait and see. John, what occurred to me was staging a fake attempted assassination of Trump could be a precursor to a real attempted assassination of Putin. So I claim, well, we were able to stop the one on Trump, but not the one on Putin. Meanwhile, and this is profoundly disturbing to the Europeans and Zelensky, Vance says the U.S. is done funding the Ukraine war, but is willing to let Europe buy American weapons for them. J.D. Vance explained the White House is done funding the war in Ukraine, but Trump will allow Europe to buy American weapons for them. The president and I certainly think America is done with funding the Ukraine war business. He told Fox News' Maria Bartiromo, Sunday Morning Futures, which, by the way, is a wonderful show. She's just terrific. We want to bring about a peaceful settlement. We want to stop the killing, but Americans, I think, are sick of continuing to send their money, their tax dollars to this particular conflict. If Europeans want to step up and actually buy weapons from American producers, we're okay with that. But we're not going to fund it ourselves. Now, John, this is before the summit. This is basically saying the U.S. is getting the hell out of the Ukraine war. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte said the alliance would continue to provide Ukraine with the weapons it needs to fight. NATO is making sure, NATO is making sure Ukraine has what it needs to stay in the fight. He made a statement after it was announced Trump would meet with Putin in Alaska Friday. It was scheduled after Trump's envoy, Witkoff, discussed the broad outlines of a deal, including Ukraine withdrawing from the Donbass, Russia retained control of the territory it already controls in southern Ukraine, limiting Ukrainian military, and an agreement not to join NATO. The proposal has concession from Moscow, as the Kremlin previously demanded all of Kherson and Zaporizhia. Note well. Ukraine President Zelensky reported with a proposal by rejecting the offer and refusing to concede any territory. John, this is prior to the summit. Before we turn, would you like to add some further thoughts?
Yes, and just for the audience, in terms of inside baseball, we're recording this a little bit later than we normally do, but it worked out very well because of this summit in Alaska. And it also worked out very well because earlier today I finished my reading of the latest edition of Foreign Affairs, which is a globalist publication here in these United States. And even these rabid American globalists, every other author there was in the Bush administration, Obama, or Biden, every other author. Even these people stand agape that the Europeans think they are strong enough to go and back Ukraine. Once the America backs out of the Ukraine, which is the case at this point, backs out backing Ukraine, the Europeans, especially Macron and some of the other ones, NATO, of course, they think they're strong enough. But even the globalists in Foreign Affairs magazine, the CFR, even they are looking askance at the delusions of these Western European globalists and Zelensky.
Yeah. Excellent. My presumption, John, had been that having this meeting, this summit in Alaska, made no sense if they were still negotiating, that they'd already reached agreement during their telephone conversations and were there to announce the agreement itself. But I was wrong. They were still debating the issues. Here are the reports we have. Putin says he and Trump reached an understanding on the Ukraine war. It was fascinating when they held a press conference. Putin came out, spoke first for 10 or 12 minutes. Then Trump added maybe 5 or 6, and it was done. And they left. Meanwhile, Joint Base Elmendorf, Richardson, Alaska. President Donald Trump and Russia's Vladimir Putin said they reached an understanding on ending the war in Ukraine after meeting for about 2.5 hours on Friday in Alaska, but offered no details. What they had agreed upon left without answering questions. In brief remarks, Putin said the pair hammered out an understanding on Ukraine and warned Europe not to torpedo the nascent progress. Speaking moments later, Trump said he'd yet to speak with President Zelensky, but he'd talk with him and European leaders soon. He suggested there wasn't a deal yet. The summit was a chance for Trump to prove he's a master deal maker and peacemaker. He likes to brag about himself as a heavyweight negotiator and has boasted he could easily find a way to bring the slaughter to a close, a promise he's been unable to keep so far. For Putin, it was an opportunity to try to negotiate a deal that would cement Russia's gains, block Kiev's bid to join the NATO military alliance, and eventually pull Ukraine back into Moscow's orbit. Meanwhile, here's Larry Johnson, who's an excellent commentary. The Putin-Trump summit, a triumph for Putin, a disaster for the neocons. If you were watching U.S. news channels, I put the word in italics to emphasize sarcasm, meaning they're really propaganda rather than news. The buildup to the press conference was the equivalent of a virgin waiting for his first sexual experience. Man, what a letdown. After hours of frenzied anticipation, when Putin and Trump finally spoke, I choose to watch Fox and was not disappointed by the froth, fury, and falsehoods voiced by an array of knuckleheads, including General Jack Keane and Trey Gowdy. Before Trump and Putin appeared before the assembled press, the commentator repeatedly trashed Putin as a monster, a killer, an evil authoritarian, and a baby killer. Their insults were echoed by many of the so-called journalists and anchors. It was pathetic. Everyone who spoke on the Fox coverage also regurgitated the propaganda. Putin was in a desperate situation, that the Russian economy is nearing collapse, and that the Russian military is failing to vanquish the plucky Ukrainians. My wife thought I was having a stroke because I was yelling at the TV in response to this stupidity. When Putin stepped to the microphone and began to speak, the neocon world imploded. Instead of chastening Putin, begging Trump for relief, the Russian president spoke calmly, initially focusing on the historical importance of Alaska as an air bridge that provided Russia with essential supply during World War II. Throughout his remarks, he praised Trump for being a reliable negotiator, for putting in place a dialogue that brings a promise of normalized relations. Putin did not retreat from a single position he had previously presented regarding Russia's requirements to bring an end to the war in Ukraine. He reiterated that the heart of the matter is the root causes, NATO's expansion. Trump drove a silver spike to the heart of the neocon vampires who are salivating in anticipation of hearing Trump and force Putin to accept a ceasefire because Putin, at least in their delusional world, was desperate for a deal. Nope. Trump praised Putin, said their conversation had been productive, though some issues remain unresolved. Here's a sampling of disappointed reaction from the print media propagandist, Daniel Sanger, reporting from Joint Base, Elmendorf, Richardson. After 3 hours of talks, President Trump and President Putin told reporters they had made progress on unspecified issues, but gave no details, took no questions, and most importantly, failed to announce a ceasefire of any kind. Katie Rogers, traveling with President Trump, both men referred to an agreement and in detail. Trump ignored shouted questions about what had happened and what the agreement was. Those of us traveling with him have just been scooted out toward Air Force One. This was a long way to come. Maggie Haberman, White House reported Putin has come away with some wins. He has got a visit to the U.S. on a military base, no less, and visuals were worn green from Trump, along with yet another delay on secondary sanctions against Russia. Erica Green, White House reporters, while it's not clear what, if any, agreement were made, Putin is demonstrating still not backing down from his position no matter what Trump says. He's pursuing his own goals in the war. He said, while Trump would emphasize economic benefits to Russia stopping its invasion, it is interested in the prosperity of America. Trump also understands that Russia has its own national interests. That included seizing land from Ukraine, Anatoly Kurmenev. And Putin talks about the need to eliminate root causes of the war. He's using his usual shorthand for a list of demands that have been categorically rejected by Ukraine and Europe. Ukraine and Europe. That's not the U.S. That's not Russia. This suggests he is maintaining his hardline position, as indeed he is then. Constant Mihut, reporting from Kiev. We're now waiting to hear from Zelensky and other European leaders whom Trump said he'd called a brief on his meeting with Putin. But the inconclusive nature of the meeting suggests some in Ukraine that a peace deal remains highly unlikely. It seems Putin has brought himself more time. Oleksiy Hondachenko, a Ukrainian lawmaker, wrote, no ceasefire or any kind of de-escalation has been agreed upon. Simply hilarious getting to watch the press squirm and spin. The sad fact is that the Western establishment is so infected with an intense hatred of Putin and Russia, they are incapable of actually listening to what Putin said. Kellyanne Conway, for example, disgraced herself by ridiculing President Putin for mentioning the importance of Orthodox Christianity as part of Russian culture. The next meeting, if there is one, will be in Moscow. Probably late September, early October, I anticipate. The weekend news cycle will be consumed with howls of outrage from most of the European leaders and from Zelensky and his crew. This is nothing more than impudence-fueled, I would add, propaganda. Here's Paul Craig Roberts on the Putin-Trump meeting. What do we make of it? A good result came of it. Trump moved away from his demand for a ceasefire, said it was more important to work toward a permanent peace than a ceasefire, which is seldom kept. This would seem to commit Trump to addressing the root cause of the conflict, which is Russia's insecurity with NATO all over her borders. Putin said the meeting marked a transition from confrontation and threats to dialogue. That prospect alone made the meeting worthwhile. These are good results. In a world of nuclear weapons, the level of tension had become untenable. For hopes to be realized, two barriers must be recognized and overcome. One is the neoconservative doctrine of American hegemony. The other is the interests of the United States. The doctrine of hegemony requires overcoming Russia in order to achieve Washington's unilateralism. Is this doctrine too institutionalized to be repudiated? The budget, influence over Congress, power of the military security complex requires a major enemy. Russia fills that role. Peace on equal terms with Russia takes away the enemy, and the budget and influence of the military security complex declines. There are military bases or weapon manufacturers in almost every state, which means the interest is also institutionalized, as President Eisenhower warned us it would be. Therefore, the question before us is, how likely is it Trump can get NATO and missile bases off of Russia's border? It's not at all likely if attention cannot be directed to the basic problems, that is, the root causes. How helpful will the media be? It's the wrong focus to emphasize Putin wanted the meeting in order to show he was not isolated and could meet with the American president without Zelensky. The meeting was fortuitous. Trump had trapped himself. His threatened secondary sanctions or tariffs against India and other BRIC members backfired. Faced with his own 10-day deadline, he had to find a way out. He found it in an immediate meeting with Putin. For Trump, the meeting was a way of getting himself off the spot, really off the hook that he'd created for himself. The opportunity to wind down a confrontation that would likely end in nuclear war is based on luck. Can this lucky outcome be turned into a mutual security agreement? That depends on the strength of the neoconservative doctrine of hegemony and the willingness of the military security complex to accept declining sales and profits. Until it's realized these two interests are the barriers to peace that must be overcome, there will be no peace. John, your thoughts?
Going back to that globalist publication, Foreign Affairs, which I've read now for probably a decade and a half, putting Russia into the globalists' big picture, they are absolute. Every edition of that Foreign Affairs brings this up again and again and again and again. They are absolutely convinced there must be a military conflict between these United States and China. And this Russia thing is a type of sideshow because Russia and China are quite allied with each other. And one of the good things, whatever criticisms we have of the Trump administration, I believe, is this focus on America. And isolationism is hardly the proper word to use, even though it was. Even that term itself is a loaded term. You wouldn't call the Trump administration isolationist, but there is a more nationalist aspect. And the greatest thing for America would be to pull out as much as possible, in my opinion, from all of these dalliances. Tie up Ukraine, which this country's government had a lot to do with. Tie that up, finish that up. And how about we don't have to have a war with China? So all of these other schemes about knocking out Russia and breaking Russia into, so many mini countries and all that, all of these globalist fantasies, they don't have to be this way. Because it's only predicated on having to maintain this post World War II empire. If we just get back to these founding principles of America, even prior to the First World War, that would be the greatest thing for this country. And it is good to see that there is that aspect to the Trump administration, whatever foibles, is that, pulling out of this globalism. So that would be my thoughts in the big picture of Ukraine and Russia and so forth. Because in the end, these globalists, they want that showdown with China. It doesn't have to be that way.
John, here's a profoundly disturbing report from Veterans Today. Russia intercepted adrenochrome shipment from Israel containing the blood of 10,000 children. Believe me, this is as bad as it gets. According to a leaked report from Russian intel, an Israeli vessel carrying the largest adrenochrome shipment ever recorded was intercepted by Russian forces at the Tartus base in Syria. Destination, Hollywood, USA. The cargo was labeled as medical humanitarian aid, but what Russian operatives found inside was anything but humanitarian. Sealed Syro canisters, military-grade cold storage units, files marked with serial codes linked to black site hospitals in war zones. Putin's adrenochrome task force briefed the Kremlin just hours after the bust. Early estimates say the batch was refined from the blood of at least 10,000 children, many allegedly harvested from the chaos of Ukraine, Syria, and Gaza. And mind you, in order to derive the adrenochrome, which is adrenaline released into the bloodstream, you have to terrorize the children. They terrorize the children, they drain their blood, and they kill them. That's what's going on in this instant 10,000 times over. Mainstream media, silent. Western governments in Israel denying everything. But the evidence is starting to leak. Here's a question keeping us up at night. If Putin just cut off the elite's main supply, how far will they go to get it back? Putin has been sounding the alarm for years, claiming that Israel is the world's top black market organ trafficker, operating a barbaric shadow network that harvests human organs from conflict zones and poverty-stricken regions for elite buyers. His warnings were long dismissed as Kremlin propaganda by a Western press that maintains a calculated wall of silence around the Russian president, determined to prevent their audience from hearing anything he has to say. But this latest seizure in Tartus may have just blown the lid off everything. The scale of the bust cannot be ignored. Sources close to the Kremlin say Putin shed 2 silent tears after reviewing the numbers. Calculation that suggests the adrenochrome shipment was extracted from the bodies of over 10,000 children. His inner circle is the largest documented atrocity of its kind in modern history. Here's how it went down. As disturbing as this news is, the fact is, Israel has been hiding in plain sight for decades, masquerading as a beacon of democracy while operating one of the most advanced black market organ networks on earth. With the full protection of Western intelligence, they've shamelessly targeted the blood and organs of the innocent, children from Gaza, orphans from Syria and Ukraine. The pattern is clear. Where there is war, there is chaos and desperation, and children are preyed upon by those serving the global elite. Russian troops, alongside operatives from Putin's specialist adrenochrome task force, have unearthed nightmarish scenes in recent years. Sprawling mass graves filled with the broken bodies of children, their pallid skin marked by the unmistakable scars of blood harvesting and ritualistic torment. The trail is getting harder to cover up. Too many leaks, too many bodies, too much blood money. So now the world faces a new question. Was this bust at TARDIS a one-off or the first domino to fall? Because if Putin really has the receipts, it's not just Israel and Hollywood that should be worried. Robert David Skeel, ex-CI case officer, whistleblower, and fan of the People's Voice, was one of the first to speak publicly about the adrenochrome trade. He didn't speculate, he named it. He said there are people in the U.S. breeding children, not raising them, not rescuing them, breeding them like cattle for sale. He said the American elite are importing children by the plane and shipload. And, of course, they're being exploited for their blood. The mainstream media branded him dangerous, delusional, insane. They called him a conspiracy theorist. He was a colleague of mine. I collaborated with him on memoranda for Trump during his first administration on 9/11 and Sandy Hook. He was a great man. But just after weeks of giving sworn testimony in court, Robert David Skeel was found dead, alone, isolated, under suspicious circumstances. Actually, he was rushed to a hospital with what appeared to be a COVID-like disease. He had ivermectin in hand, insisted not being put on a respirator. Instead, they sedated him, put him on a respirator, and killed him. Not alone, in a hospital. Now, with Russia pulling up the rot from beneath the surface, Steele's words ring louder than ever. One day, we will realize what was found in his private files, the notes, the photos, the communications, and the hidden list of U.S. politicians he claimed were active clients of the global child trafficking and adrenochrome trade. But not yet, because this isn't just information, this is ammunition, and it's dangerous in the wrong hands. Robert was a gold standard source, deep CIA, deep intel. He didn't deal in rumors, he dealt in receipts, and that's why they silenced him. But despite their efforts, the cracks are widening. More victims are coming forward. Survivors of satanic ritual abuse networks operating in the shadows of Hollywood, Washington, and London. And what are they saying? It confirms everything. Same symbols, same procedures, same names. This isn't a theory. It's a pattern. And it's starting to unravel. Jeffrey Epstein's Zorro Ranch in New Mexico has long been the subject of disturbing allegations, specifically his reported obsession with eugenics and selective breeding. Multiple witnesses and former associates claim Epstein spoke openly about seeding the human race with his own DNA, using the ranch as a basis for his reproductive agenda. While the mainstream treated it as bizarre but fringe, the implications are far darker. When paired with Epstein's known ties to global trafficking networks, intel agencies, and elite circles, Zorro Ranch begins to look less like a luxury hideaway, more like a controlled breeding ground, one node in a much larger, coordinated system of abuse. The patterns repeat. Isolate compounds, underage victims, silent enablers, and always protection from the top. Thanks to Putin's adrenochrome task force, all bets are off, and the satanic cult may well be exposed. John, your thoughts?
It's been a few years since I've heard Veterans Today. It's good to see that they're still at it, still breaking some news there. I would say about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, there were serious protests in Kiev of parents of soldiers, adult soldiers, of course, and they were complaining, talking about organ harvesting. They were complaining that the bodies of their sons were coming back and there were no organs in them. And there were enough parents who were noticing this in their own bereavement and their own tribulation. There were enough of them that were talking to each other that there were protests about the organ harvesting that was going on. And I don't have any idea about the intricacies of adrenochrome, but there have been, besides children, and I've said on this program, a speculation, and that right now is all it is, that most of the abortions that are done in America, I believe those children are raised up and harvested in different ways as well, because the mother doesn't necessarily see what's going on as her feet are in the stirrups. So there's nothing to say that baby's not whisked out and reared somewhere else, but that's beside the point. What's on point is besides children in these war zones in the Middle East and in Ukraine, and there's a lot of connection there between the Jews in the Middle East and Israel, and Ukrainian Jews. There are plenty of wounded adults as well, and presumably their blood can be harvested on these battlefields and these burn victims and so forth. So there is no shortage, I should think, of this going on. And then the final point, it was kind of a joke during COVID-19, but a dark joke. That the reason celebrities and politicians were acting so weird during those days, and there was bizarre behavior. I'm thinking in particular of Stephen Colbert. Just really wacky stuff, or Nancy Pelosi. The joke was, it was a dark joke, that their adrenochrome had run out. But we may be seeing some quirky behavior coming up because of this shipment being interrupted.
Oh, John, I think you're 100% spot on. Correct. Meanwhile, State of the Nation issues a warning. Beware America. It's now false flag season in the USA. Because there's absolutely no way Trump can fix his Epstein Gate F up. You know who will attempt to fix it for him, but not without the extreme risk of blowing wide open the whole worldwide blackmail and bribery operation that functions as a complex international crime syndicate whose primary revenue streams come from a global child exploitation, child sexual abuse, and child slavery racket. What better way for the Khazarian mafia to fix this than false flag terrorism? Therefore, the USA in particular should expect a perpetration of a major 9/11 level false flag terrorist attack or series thereof, staged in major cities like New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, Seattle, or other sanctuary state, where the U.S. intel community, U.S. armed forces, and the local law enforcement can get away with bloody murder anytime they are so disposed. Meanwhile, in relation to my Conspiracy 101 course, as I posted on Twitter X, I'm a world expert on JFK. I'm also a world expert on 9/11. I'm again a world expert on Sandy Hook. For a certainty, I am the only expert in the world on JFK, 9/11, and Sandy Hook. If you want to learn from the best, just take this course, Critical Thinking and Conspiracy Theories, beginning September 3rd. Here's more about it, the whole outline of the course, all 15 weeks, and further, including about how to enroll. John, I'm just so pleased to be collaborating with you in this project. I look forward to the class.
Yes, absolutely, Dr. Fetzer. It's an honor on this end of things as well. I will put your page for this course down below, in addition to your own websites there, so people can find out and see the write-up there. And the thing that a class adds, there's a lot going on in the world of education, and people are having good questions of why do we even have schools and what's the purpose of them. One of the real unique things that schools offer, that simply just surfing the web and just listening to 10 lectures on random topics, something that Dr. Fetzer's course, for example, offers, is being able to integrate a lot of seemingly disparate topics, JFK and Newtown and so forth, into a whole. That is, in this day of information overload and such good research, that is the thing a lot of us are missing. Especially, as we get a bit older and away from our school days, this idea of integrating knowledge. And I would just like to add that what people will get when they enroll in Dr. Fetzer's course is that organization, which is just missing altogether from, just monkey branching from one video and article to another, which we all do, and that's fine too. But to organize it and to present it in a symphonia, that's what Dr. Fetzer really will be able to bring to the table. So this is an honor to help run this class as well on this end of things.
Those are very astute observations, John. Yeah, I want to teach you how to think things through, how to spot these phony events, how to sort out authentic evidence from fabricated, using a series of examples, including JFK, 9/11, the moon landing, Sandy Hook, Boston bombing, Orlando and Dallas, many more, Las Vegas. Believe me, you will come through this course and you'll know what's been going on and how much the public has been played by their own government to promote their political agenda and to fulfill what William Casey declared to be the objective of the CIA disinformation program. Namely, we know that it will be a success when everything the American people believe is false. I'm helping you to guarantee it will never be a success, because you'll be able to sort out the difference between the facts and the phony, the fiction and reality. Guaranteed. Think about it. This might be the best investment you've made in recent time.
Great. Well, thank you for the news breakdown this week, Dr. Fetzer. And once again, Dr. Fetzer's websites and the class website will be down below in the description. So to the audience, thank you for your attention here to these topics and our own angle on things. And especially, Dr. Fetzer, thank you for guiding us through news with the Fetz this time around. Thank you very much.
My great pleasure, John. I look forward to our next.